Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing, and our guest today is Sajan George, who is the CEO and founder of Matchbook Learning. Sajan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We're thrilled to have you. Now, Sajan, let's start with the problem that Matchbook Learning is designed to solve. Take us through what is the situation, what is the problem that you are trying to address?
That's a great question. The problem I'm trying to address is that public education in America is largely broken. And it's broken largely for children of poverty. It doesn't work. Inevitably, if you are a child born in poverty, being raised in poverty, the chances of you having academic success are nowhere near the same as children of affluence. And in a 21st century world where education really has become the only way to become a productive, contributing citizen of our society, then we have to solve that inequality. We have to solve for that imbalance in the system.
What do you think are the fundamental drivers? What's causing outcomes in the United States to deteriorate across the board, and why is it affecting those who are experiencing poverty so much more?
We've had an education system that has largely remained unchanged for about 100 years. So it's difficult to find any product, any service, anywhere that if you essentially made, created, manufactured that product in the same way for 100 years and didn't change it, that product would be very effective. And when you think of education as a product or a process, that's largely what's happened. The rate of obsolescence, the things that we have to know, the skills that we have to exhibit today are different than they were 60, 70, 80, even 10 years ago. And education just hasn't kept up. What that means for children, and that's true for all children, children of affluence, middle class, poverty. For children of poverty, school is the only way that they get those skills and habits and competencies. I shouldn't say the only way, but it's overwhelmingly the pathway that they get. For children of means, their parents can supplement their education with experiences, with culture, two parents often, that help develop those skills and those characters and those competencies they need to be successful, in addition to and in partnership with schools. For our children of poverty, particularly the children of Matchbook serving, they may or may not come from two-parent homes. They may not have a parent that went to university. They may not have a parent with the resources, network, and access and opportunities that perhaps I have for my children. And so the fundamental problem gets even more exacerbated when you start applying it for children of poverty.
It's really just tragic. But tell us now what you're doing at Matchbook Learning to change the game.
So I founded Matchbook Learning 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, with this really sort of simple idea. Instead of having every school start school at the same starting point and move them through the same amount of content in the same amount of time, and then be assessed on the same things, what if we radically personalize that? What if we met every student where they are, allowed them different rates of growth depending on what they could handle, and gave them ownership over their own learning? And the idea was, what if we apply this to the most needy children in America? So we're serving now in two charter schools, one in Detroit and one in Newark, schools that we took over to actually incubate this idea that these children at the very bottom could actually perform with children at the very top. And if we could do that and systemize how we do that, this personalized model of education, the hope is, the dream is, that this model could actually be replicated by others around the country once it's proven out.
It's exciting to think about this. Give us some measure. You must, in the process of developing this, have had some, if not good data, at least some good anecdotes to suggest that you're making progress, you're on the right track. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so before we took over our own and created our own charter schools in Detroit and Newark, for the first almost 4 years, we prototyped this idea in 4 different schools in Detroit over that period of time. These were bottom 5% schools, kindergarten through 8th grade. That first school got out of the bottom 5% and got an award from the state of Michigan. We doubled the percentage of kids proficient on the state exam in reading, quintupled the percentage in math. The second school, the same thing happened, came out of the bottom 5%. In a single year, that school went from only having 7 out of 832 kids proficient on the state exam in either reading math. In 1 year, same kids, different model, working with those teachers in that school. It had the 5th highest student gains of any school in the entire city of Detroit. So year over year, we've been getting better and better at sort of incubating this model. What we've been able to see and prove is that when you meet kids where they are, you give them ownership over their own learning, you leverage technology to help track and monitor and manage all these different learning pathways. And as kids begin to own their own learning and get those rapid feedback loops, we start to see students make more than a year's worth of growth in a single year, a year and a half, 2.5, 3 years, which actually, if you think about it, is fundamentally impossible in a traditional school. The most kids can learn in a single year is a year's worth of growth because that's all they're teaching them. They don't allow them to go faster and they don't allow them to go slower. It's a very monolithic, one-size-fits-all traditional education model. And what we're trying to move to improve out is we need to be personalized in our approach. In the same way, every other, it seems like, segment of society is personalized in the way it delivers its product or service. You or I read the books we want, the articles we want, the music we download. We're no longer downloading an album at a time or downloading an entire newspaper at a time. We're picking and choosing what we need and want and calibrating and integrating that together. And education has to take advantage of this powerful force of personalization to better meet the needs of what I would call the clients, their students that it serves.
Interesting. Now, how this radically alters the experience for two people, both the student and the teacher, and the technology involved is just fascinating to me. So walk us through, if you would, how a teacher is interacting with a student and the role of technology, and then take us through how the student is experiencing this, his relationship with the teacher and the technology.
Sure. So literally, we're in the second week of school right now, and our students are taking assessments. And you think, well, what are you assessing them on? They've only been in school less than 2 weeks. We're assessing them to figure out and calibrate what's that starting point. So I may have a 7th grader who's in a 7th grade class, but the assessment says they're really reading at a 5th grade level. Well, we're going to start them at that 5th grade level. But that same student may be doing math at a 6th grade level, and maybe at an 8th grade level. Wherever they are, we'll calibrate to them. So for the student, they open their laptop, and for every single learning standard, for every single grade, for every core subject, we have identified, we call it a playlist, but a menu of options on how to learn that particular standard. So if a 5th grader should be working on some particular standard in math, and let's say we say it has to do with long division, then they'll start working on long division. Now, I may be sitting next to that same 7th grader in my class, but I will be working on a completely different standard, again, based on what I need. Once we learn and we choose how we best learn, there's a rate, just like you student pick any 3 of them. The student exhibits ownership. Once they do that, they conference with another student, usually one who's ahead of them, who checks to see, yep, you did your work. Then they conference with the teacher, who then makes sure that they know how to do long division. After that, they have to apply what they've learned. So every single standard has a real world application. We want to know, how do you apply long division in everyday life? So they do a project around that. And then they do an assessment that moves them forward. So in 25 students in a class, 25 different learning pathways, 25 different rates of growth. What does that mean for the teacher, the other person that's sort of experiencing all this change? The teacher walks in their class in the morning, gets a quick assessment of where's every kid in this cycle. Okay, I know where every kid is. Who do I need to be conferencing with? Who's ready to conference with me? Whose work do I need to be checking? They're ready to do their project or their apply. Who's moving at a really fast rate of growth? Who's moving at a really slow rate of growth? All of that information is being captured on a technology platform we've developed called Spark. It's open sourced. Spark is keeping track of that. And what it does is it informs that teacher where and how to intervene. Go meet with Sajan over here, because he's ready now to do work on he's completed his project on how to apply long division in a real world example. Devin, however, is working on single digit addition. And so Devin's ready to conference to show that he understands that concept before he moves. So what it's doing is it's helping manage the teacher's time, and it frees the teacher up to be really like an individual teacher. They're dealing with students either individually or in small groups, removing them away from this pressure to teach all of the students at the same time on the same content. So both the student and the teacher are experiencing radical levels of personalization, which we're capturing the technology to help support both. The technology is not the answer. It just enables them to do this personalization with a high degree of robustness.
Now, how ready are you for scale? A lot of what you're doing seems to me to be programmatic, in that whether it's how you teach a teacher or literally the software in a computer, it's essentially software. And when I hear that, I think this is ready to scale really fast because software moves quickly.
Software moves quickly, but the process of turning around a school, transforming a school, redesigning, rethinking the way we deliver education is very much a flesh-on-flesh exercise. So we spend a lot of time thinking deeply about the change management processes, whether that's how do we onboard teachers to this? How do we support our teachers through this process? How do we provide incentives for kids to increase their rate of growth? So what we're trying to do in our two schools, Merit Prep here in Newark, New Jersey, and Michigan Technical Academy in Detroit, Michigan, is not just prove out the technology and the overall model, but begin to systemize all of the change management processes that have to happen in creating a completely new way of school. Our hope is by investing in this open source technology platform, Spark, and codifying these change management processes, what we can do in potentially a year's time is invite other schools that want to replicate this model, that we would give them Spark, our open source technology, and we'd run them through some kind of training that gives them sort of a deep dive experience into how we do what we do, maybe apprentice for a few weeks in one of our two schools, and then give them the technology, say, we've given you the tools, we've given you the training, we've apprenticed, and now you're ready to implement this kind of model. We call it a blended competency-based model of education in your school. So I think we're probably at least a year away from scale, but the team here at Matchbook Learning is investing pretty heavily in making sure this not only works in Merit Prep and Michigan Technical Academy, our two charter schools, but eventually what works there could work for the rest of the nation. By proving it out in these challenged schools, these struggling schools, we think it could be a model for any school of any shape or size that really wants to personalize learning for their students.
Is it something that you can even conceive of laying it down in a traditional public school that doesn't have kind of the innovative mindset of a charter school?
Candidly, we hope that's where it eventually goes. I mean, the majority of kids today are in traditional non-charter public schools. And I think what you'll find is there's an emerging number of them under the leadership of some savvy principals and even superintendents that recognize technology has to infuse the way that we deliver education to our children. How that happens, the sequence in which that happens, what's the design principles around that, what's the feedback loops, what kinds of teachers do you recruit for this kind of model, what content to use, what assessments to use, how do you integrate both of those together. Those are the things we think we're willing to share and hopefully help them with. So my hope is as more and more states around the country start to look at how to intervene and intersect with their struggling schools, this model could be one that they would be interested in potentially partnering with us and learning the methodology so they can deploy it in their respective states.
Now, Sajan, you are a tremendously successful person who is already a role model to many and becoming a hero to countless others. who do you look up to as a role model yourself?
Well, you're way too kind with the compliment. I'll take it, but I don't know if I live up to all those ideals. That's a really hard question, only because I feel like I have so many. I'm generally moved and inspired by people, men or women or both, that believe, think, see, and act on the premise of usually a singular conviction. And they act on that conviction not because of influence or impact or riches or glory, but because they believe in the rightness of that conviction. So obviously names like Martin Luther King, William Wilberforce come to mind, but I've always been inspired by people that have a deep-seated conviction on the rightness of things and are willing to sacrifice substantially in order to pursue that conviction to whatever end it takes them, success or failure, large scale or small scale. They believe in the truth of what they're doing, and they want others to experience the truth of that because they feel in the process it'll lead to their redemption in some shape or form. And that's actually what inspires me.
That really is a great response, and certainly great people to look up to. You obviously are extremely capable. You could be doing anything. Why tackle education? I mean, what a challenge. What a challenge. Limited budgets, scary politics. Oh, why are you willing to do this?
Yeah, there's certain days where I ask myself the same question. You know, my parents emigrated to this country, and my father came, really for the promise of education. He emigrated from India, and he had a chance to come here and do his undergrad, master's, and eventually his PhD. And so I didn't grow up in poverty like the children that we serve, but I knew firsthand the benefit of education, first from my father, and then secondly, the importance he placed upon it, and my mother, on what public education means for me. It was the way that you would develop yourself into a productive citizen. So when I graduated from college, in finance, I had friends going into investment banking and a number of fields, management consulting, et cetera. And I was really drawn to turnarounds right from grad school. I just felt like turning around companies would be a way to use my skills, again, to serve on a certain conviction and to hopefully try to redeem or restore something that was broken. And that corporate turnaround work eventually, by chance, led me to try to turn around some urban public school districts, major ones in this country. St. Louis was our first, but then New Orleans, DC, New York City, Detroit were several others. And that eventually led me to found Matchbook Learning and to try to apply that same turnaround methodology, originally from companies to school districts and now to individual schools, and really the most underperforming schools. And I would say this, that it's such a privilege to get a chance to use the skills and passions you have on a problem you think is worthy of those skills and passions, one that can really consume your life and your mission and your work for a long period of time. The problem is much bigger than Matchbook Learning can solve, and that's part of what makes the work enjoyable, knowing that you're working on something that has a long-term trajectory. And so I'm personally motivated, but I joined several other people on this team that feel exactly the same way that I do. I just happen to be able to speak at forums like this, but if you interviewed anybody on our team, any of my fellow colleagues, teachers, principals, they would articulate probably the same or more passion. We have to fix this problem. It's worth spending our vocational careers trying to fix it, because we'd rather, every single person, to a man and a woman on this side, would say, I'd rather fail at this than probably be successful at just about anything else.
What an inspiring conclusion there to that thought. I appreciate that. It is so powerful to have something worthwhile to do. Sajan, one of the things I like to collect from each of the guests I have on my show, and it's been well over 500 now, is to get what I call an impact hack. Something that you do that you think helps you have more impact. What's an example of something you do regularly, consistently, maybe daily, that we can do, that we can emulate to help us have more impact?
That's a great thought. I start and end my day virtually every day the same. I actually, I get up in the morning, get on my knees and say a quick prayer. And then I journal what I need to do for that day. I don't worry so much what happens to happen the day after or the day after or the day after. But these are the 3 or 5 or 6 things I need to get done today. So I literally write them old school, write them out. And I have that piece of paper with me. And at the end of the day, I look back on that piece of paper and say, what did I get done? And not just did I get it done, tick it off, but did I get it done in the way that I needed to get it done? Because that helps me frame the next day. And then again, I just drop by my bed, drop on my knees and say a prayer reflecting on the day. And those 2 bookends are sort of the way to open and close the day. Gives me both a sense of clarity and a peace. It takes the massive challenge of the work we're trying to do and just breaks it down and what has to be done today. And I think there's something about breaking out really massive problems into these sort of bite-sized, manageable chunks that gives me a sense of calm and a way to handle the inevitable disappointment, challenge, frustration, struggles, striving on this work. You talk to anybody that's frustrated in the work that they do, it's because they're losing a bit of clarity around where they're going, what they need to accomplish right now. And they're focusing on a number of factors, many of which are either beyond their control or beyond the window of time that they can impact right now. So just trying to achieve that sense of clarity. And honestly, it's a coping mechanism, because if I think too long-term out or try to integrate too many things, I just get confused. I mean, mentally, I don't think most of us don't. I definitely don't have the capacity to juggle that many things in my head for that amount of time. So clarity around how you start today, how you end the day, and starting and ending with a sense of gratitude and hope is probably the biggest thing that helps me in my work.
That's a great impact hack if ever there was. Love it. Love it. Thank you very much, Sajan. I really appreciate you sharing that. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Before you go, tell us how people can connect with you, learn more about Matchbook Learning, and otherwise engage.
Sure. So we have a website, matchbooklearning.com. So matchbooklearning.com. And what you'll see on there, on the homepage, is a blog that I tend to do at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. So you'll be able to keep up with what we're doing. We have a Twitter handle @MatchbookLearn. And you can go to our website and you can connect to us there if you have information or thoughts or ideas. But what we're trying to do over time is produce thought pieces on our work as it's happening. So showing you the good, the bad, and ugly. So you'll see on there historically our new technology platform, how we've been building it, what our teachers are experiencing. We think this process of school turnaround, school transformation is a radical one. It's not one that's done very often and done very well in this country. So the more we can share the story and our learning curve as it happens, we hope it actually builds and informs the field. And in the coming months, you'll see more things about our platform, how we're thinking about scale, and our hopes and dreams that this would impact more than just Merit Prep and Michigan Technical Academy, but eventually any school that's struggling that needs to rethink the way it delivers education for the benefit of the children it serves.
Fantastic. Sajan, thank you very much for joining us today. We've loved having you.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. Let's do some good.